Hello, everybody, and Tashidele Chökhor Duechen. Chökhor Duechen is the day that commemorates the first turning of the wheel, or the first teaching that the Buddha ever gave. And this, I thought, would be an excellent moment to record a short message to you, a little bit about what that is, and also a little story that I might tell beforehand, if you don't mind. So let's get to it. Sangye Chöda Shoki Jo Namla, John Shubadu Dani Kapsuchi, Dagation Sogi, Pesan Nangan, Jala Penchi Sange Zupasho. Sangye Chöda Shoki Jo Namla, John Shubadu Dani Kapsuchi, Dage Churche, Pesan Nangan, Jala Penchi Sange Zupasho. Sangye Chöda Shoki Jo Namla, John Shubadu Dani Kapsuchi, Dage Churche, Pesan Nangan, Jala Penchi Sange Zupasho. So, this story, the first story, is really it's kind of anecdotal. Apparently it's not actually in the Pali Canon, but I don't know. I don't know the details of this. But there was a king called King Prasenajit, and King Prasenajit was a powerful king. And during the time of the Buddha, there were many. It was the time of great ferment in philosophy and so forth in India. So when the king heard about this, about the Buddha, he was intrigued because there were so many teachers. But the Buddha apparently there was something special about him, so he decided to go and check it out for himself. So he went along, and he sat respectfully and listened to the Buddha's teachings. And he was amazed. He thought, "Wow, somebody so young, so wise. Obviously he has achieved some kind of enlightenment." So after the teaching was over, he went to see the Buddha and said, "Lord, please forgive me, but I want to know, how is it possible that somebody so young could have such an enlightened perspective? How is it possible that somebody so young could really achieve, it seems, to achieve enlightenment?" And the Buddha, one of the things the Buddha said to him, he said, "Well, there are four things you have to be careful about when they're young. You have to be careful about when they're young. And the first is a prince. The second is a snake. Be careful of the young snakes. And the third is fire. And the fourth is a monk." It's interesting, an interesting, response, because obviously princes, they develop into kings and they become more powerful and they change, and etc. When we talk about like a prince, eventually, coming into power, and before you thought he was young and didn't, etc., etc. And fire is quite obvious. Yeah, fire, it starts small, but boom, it goes. Any of you who've lived, there are forest fires going on in some parts of the world. You know that it starts with a small spark, and then also snakes. Little snakes get to be big snakes, and monks. Monks start out very young and not so knowledgeable, but then they become quite knowledgeable. So this is my interpretation of it anyway. In any case, so King Prasenajit was fascinated by the Buddha, and at one point, the Buddha was teaching a parable. He was teaching a parable, and King Prasenajit had come to listen to him. And this was the story of a young man who was walking through the wasteland. He was walking through it, and it was late at night. He was traveling. He was trying to get to a place quite far away, but he was a little bit late going through the wasteland, and it was getting dark. And as he was walking through the twilight, he thought he heard something in the distance. But he tried not to pay attention to it. It was very quiet and kind of spooky, So he's going through this whole thing, like, what could it be? Listen, okay, let's not focus on that, as you do when you're spooked out. And he keeps going, and then he hears in the distance a growl, and the growl sounds very much like the growl of a tiger. And he thought, "Oh, that's not good. I better move. I better hurry up." So he starts walking faster, and so he gets to the point where he can hear the growling getting louder, but then he hears the tiger roar for the first time. Roar! And that, that spooks him. That really freaks him out. So he starts running. And he starts running and running because he knows the tiger's getting closer. And as the tiger is chasing him, of course, a human being can't outrun a tiger. And he's running and running and running as fast as he can. And he can almost feel the breath of the tiger on his neck. And he's thinking, well, I'm done for, but I still have to go. I'm not going to surrender. I've got to go. And he sees, like not too far away from him, he sees that it's a cliff, but there's a tree on the side of the cliff. So he runs and he leaps onto the tree and he tries to climb up as high as possible because the tiger can still kind of, reach him maybe. And he gets up to the top and he's on a branch. And he's just thinking, oh, what is going to happen to me now? And the branch snaps. And he falls. And there's this cliff that goes down a long, long way, and there's down below is this ocean, and as he's going down, he sees there's a vine dangling down from where the tree roots were, and he grabs the vine, and he holds onto the vine. It burns his hands a bit, but he manages to stop. There's nowhere really to place his feet, but he's still holding onto the vine for dear life, and he thinks, wow, whew, I know, what do I do now? Okay, let's just for the time being, I'm safe now for the time being, but what do I do? And so, but then he looks down, thinking that maybe he could, just make his way down the vine and go into the sea and swim away. But he looks down, and there are 3 dragons waiting for him, and they're kind of, they're moving around, and they're very fierce, and they're snarling. And he said, oh gosh, wow, I can't go down there. They'll kill me. And so then he's just like, oh, whew, what do I do? And he's sitting there thinking about his bad luck, and then suddenly there's a drop of something that comes and touches his nose, drops on his nose, and it trickles down, and his tongue, he touches it. It's honey. It's the most delicious honey. And he looks up and he says, oh, there must be a beehive up there that I didn't notice when I was running. And he looks up and there's a beehive and there's honey dripping out. Something has caused it to be, maybe with the broken branch that he broke, but it's spilling out, and he's tasting this little bit of honey coming down. He said, oh wow, this is exactly what I need. I was so hungry, I'm freaking out, so at least this honey is, oh, it tastes so good. It's tasting, okay. And kind of forgets where he is for the moment, and then thinks, okay, well, maybe I can just quietly climb up to this vine and see what's going to happen. Maybe I can get around this whole thing. He starts climbing, he looks up, and to his horror, he sees there's 2 mice, one white and one black, that are just gnawing quietly through the vine. And he's trying to shoo them off. He's like, go away, go away, go away. But they don't care. They just keep getting, and they're getting closer and closer to each other. And pretty soon he figures this vine's going to snap, and he's going to end up falling into the sea. And it's getting really scary. And suddenly King Prasanajit leaps up, please stop, Lord. I'm so scared now. I'm so freaked out. I'm so scared. And please don't, stop the story, please. And what happened was not because, he was caught up in this fairy tale, but he understood the parable. He understood that this was, the fate. This is where we are. We are being chased by death. We're holding on, and there's this karma that goes day and night and is eating into our whatever is keeping us. And so he freaked out. Please stop. And anyway, so it brings us to the theme of the first teaching of the Buddha. And the first teaching of the Buddha was the 4 Noble Truths. And you have to understand this idea of noble, this translation, it comes from the word Arya. And Arya meant nobles, but in this context, in the Buddhist context, when you're an Arya, you have achieved a certain level of vision, and you are no longer an ordinary person. You can see things clearly. And so when he says the 4 Arya truths, it means this is the truth that the Aryas can see and understand. This is really, these are the height of the most important truths that you'll need to know. And so the first truth that the Buddha taught, and he taught, of course, in the deer park, you know the story, I'm sure, and he was accompanied by his five main disciples. And he said, the first noble truth is that this situation is dukkha, is suffering. And King Prasanajit, when he heard this story about the parable, he understood completely. He said, this is dukkha, this is suffering. Dukkha has this meaning of, it can mean suffering, but the suffering also has the connotation of always never being satisfied, lack of satisfaction. So when the Buddha taught that, he says, look, we're always wanting something else. And here we are, and we're actually in the suffering. And we get these little bits of honey, these little bits of pleasures. And we think, okay, it's not so bad after all. We've got some honey coming in. This tastes good. We have some pleasures and we're having some fun. Hey, come on, man, lighten up. But there's these two mice up there, The two mice are chewing through the vine of our life, that's holding us in life. And it's day and night, black and white, day and night. It's just a matter of time. So the death, the tiger, that was this, scary death, but he, just has to wait for the karma to, and then we don't have the karma to be alive anymore. Poof. So King Prasennajit was, he was very sensitive to that. He understood completely, I think. Anyway, at this point, the Buddha was very clear that the next thing that had to be taught was, where does this dukkha come from? What causes this dukkha? What causes this dukkha, I mean, when we're talking about this is suffering, but what causes it? And he said it's very simple. Well, he didn't say that. He just said the second noble truth, the second Arya truth, is that grasping is the cause of suffering. And this is actually, when you study a little bit about dependent arising, you see there's two aspects to this idea of grasping being the cause of suffering. First of all, the idea that we grasp at existence as being something inherent, something that is, is just a given. Obviously, sorry, a little wardrobe problem here. Oh, I'm seeing everything in reverse. That's why I'm getting confused. But the grasping, and what is the grasping at? It's grasping at inherent existence, grasping at self, mainly in the context of the human, grasping at ourselves, thinking that we exist by itself, like we just, as if it's a given that we will exist, and that we exist inherently, and that we exist without any support of causes and conditions. And this grasping, that's one aspect. But the second aspect is, because that comes from an ignorance of not understanding, that plants a seed in our consciousness. If you look at the Wheel of Life, you'll see these progresses. And at a certain point, when we experience some kind of contact and then the feeling and so forth, what happens is that we start to, oh, that's nice, or oh, we don't want that. And that triggers a different level of agitation. And that different level of agitation is, the second type of grasping. It's like we just, it's like having a beer, which is in the picture. Oh, that's nice, let's have another one. I don't drink beer, but apparently, people do. I'll have another one. Another one. And then it gets kind of a bit wild. It gets a bit, out of control. And that's the grasping. And that agitation in the mind, what that does, it triggers the karmic seed that's been planted. It triggers it to manifest. So that's what the Buddha said is, look, the cause of suffering, of dukkha, is grasping. Although, or desire, whichever you want to word you want, but it's that agitation of the mind which, is really wanting to have this. And actually, you could say the base of it all is ignorance, which would not be incorrect. But I think, it's important to bear in mind that this is talking about the activation of suffering and the planting of suffering and the activation of suffering. Okay. Here we are in this situation. Well, what do we do? How do we get out of this? This is not a great situation, because it's cyclical. We keep going from one thing to the other, and we keep grasping it. And the base of it is grasping. That's the clue. That's the clue. And then the Buddha said this. The third thing he said was, this is the cessation of suffering. And what he meant is, if you know the cause of suffering, if you stop the cause of suffering, the suffering will cease. And if you really work at it, it will be definitive. It'll cease completely. There will be true cessation, real cessation. So that's the third noble truth. And then the fourth noble truth, the Buddha pointed to the path, which basically, if you boiled it down, would be, this is the path to the cessation, or the way to cessation. And if you boil it down, it'll come down to ethics, yeah, sila, and concentration, yeah, samadhi, and prajna, sila, samadhi, prajna, which is, if you in the Theravadan schools, for example, they break that out into 10 different paths, noble paths. But whichever way you look at it, it's basically it's maintaining a morality, clear morality, maintaining concentration, focusing, not getting distracted by too many things, and then finally is this wisdom, So you have this sila, samadhi, prajna. Prajna is wisdom. So that's the Four Noble Truths. And of course, they're not the brightest of the of the disciples got it straight away. This is suffering. This is the cause of suffering, and this is there is a cessation of suffering, and this is the path to it. Got it straight away. But some had to have it explained in more details. But I think that is basically, the foundation of the Buddhist practice. It's the foundation of the Buddhist view. And if you study and understand the Four Noble Truths in greater depth, of course, obviously the Buddha reiterated it he said it twice more, but with different nuance. And I won't go into that right now. And there's also a study where you have, for each Noble Truth, there are 4 aspects. So you have 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths and so forth. This is not really, this is a basic Buddhism class, so I'm not going to go into it. And it's a subject on its own. It's a complete subject on its own, which will probably take at least 3 or 4 sessions to explain to some degree of clarity. But it is an important basic thing to understand in our practice. So thank you very much, and I wish you all to have a great year ahead, great year of practice, and may you progress, may you understand deeper, and bless you all. May the Buddhas bless you. Thank you.